The Grand Spire of Ixis was a beautiful building. It was not made of metal or stone but seemed to be grown like a giant glowing shell. The walls gave off a soft, pulsing light that was warm and gentle on the eyes. This light was the heart of the Ixian Star Empire. In these quiet, shining halls, people moved with grace. They were the Ixians. Their skin had a soft glow like the light from the walls, and they wore long, flowing robes. Among them, a man named Jin stood out.
He was a human.
He did not glow. His body was made for strength and endurance, not for beauty. He wore a simple dark uniform. His job was to be a sentinel, a guard for the Empress. He stood very still outside her private solarium, a room filled with strange plants from different worlds. His eyes, which were a plain, dark color, watched everything. The Ixians had machines that could sense many things, but Jin had been trained to see the small things. A tiny movement of a hand, a quick look in the eye, the way someone held their shoulders. These small signs often told a truer story than any machine. The large door at the end of the hall opened. Empress Mireille walked in. She was young, and her light was a brighter, purer white than the others. She moved smoothly like water flowing. Her face was kind, but today it looked tired. She was followed by two of her helpers. Walking right beside her was her husband, Kale. Kale was the Emperor consort. He was tall and his glow was a deep, confident blue. He smiled at his wife, speaking in a low, pleasant voice. To anyone else, they looked like a perfect royal couple, but Jin was not anyone else. As Mireille walked past Jin, he saw something. It was very fast. Kale's eyes were on his wife, but the look was not one of love or support. For just a second, Jin saw a different feeling. It was a look of cold satisfaction. It was the look of a man who was pleased with a secret plan. Then it was gone and Kale's warm smile was back. Jin did not move. He did not change his expression. But inside he felt a small alarm. He stored the memory away. Later, his shift was almost over. He was doing a final walk through the main hall when he saw them again. Kale was talking with Sue. Sue was the head of the Royal Ixian Guard. He was a proud man who did not like humans. He thought they were clumsy and primitive. He believed only Ixians should protect the Empress. Jin moved back into the shadow of a tall, glowing pillar. He watched. Kale and Sue were speaking in very quiet voices. Their conversation looked serious. Then Jin saw Kale's hand move. It was a small, clever movement. He passed a small, shiny object to Sue. It was a data crystal. Sue took it and hid it in his robe immediately. This was wrong. Why would the Emperor consort need to pass a secret message to the guard captain? They could speak openly anytime they wanted. This was a secret. Secrets in a palace were often dangerous. Jin's mind started to work, putting the pieces together. The cold look, the secret data crystal. He thought about the routines of the palace. He thought about the Empress's safety. He needed to know more. When his shift ended, he went to the Sentinel's quarters. It was a plain room without the beautiful glowing light of the rest of the spire. The other human guards were resting or talking. Jin went to a small computer terminal. He had a low-level security access. He could only see the public logs of the palace, the records of who went where and when. He started looking for anything unusual around the Empress's private rooms. He checked the logs for her bedchamber. Most of the entries were normal. Cleaning drones, system checks. Then he saw it. Early that morning, a 1-minute dampening field had been activated inside the Empress's bedchamber. A dampening field blocks all sound and most energy signals. It is used for very private meetings or for sensitive security work. The log said it was for a sensor calibration, but that did not make sense. Sensor calibrations were always done by the Royal Guard techs. The order for this one, however, came from a private authorization code. Jin typed in a command to trace the code. The screen flashed. The authorization code belonged to Kale. Jin leaned back in his chair. His heart was beating faster now. The cold look, the secret data crystal, and now, the Emperor consort had ordered a secret 1-minute silence inside the Empress's own room. He had no reason to do that. Unless he was testing something. Unless he was planning something. A terrible picture was forming in Jin's mind. He thought of Kale's face, the mask of kindness slipping to show the coldness underneath. He thought of Sue's dislike for the Empress's new, modern ideas. What if they were working together? What if the data crystal held instructions? What if the dampening field was a test for a trap? He knew what he had to do. It was a huge risk. He was a human. accusing the Emperor Consort and the head of the guard with no real proof. Only a feeling, a look, and a few strange facts. If he was wrong, his career was over. He would be sent away in disgrace, but if he was right, the Empress's life was in danger. That evening there was a big state banquet. Empress Mirai would be there, and then she would return to her private chambers to rest. Jin knew the route she would take. He waited in a quiet hallway near the lift that went up to her rooms. He could hear the faint sound of music and talking from the banquet hall far away. Finally, the doors opened. Empress Mirai walked out looking even more tired than before. Her glow was dim. Kale was not with her. She was alone with her two helpers. This was his chance. As she walked toward the lift, Jin stepped forward. He bowed deeply, as was the custom. "Your Radiance," he said, his voice low but clear. The Empress stopped, surprised. Her two helpers looked shocked. A Sentinel did not speak to the Empress unless spoken to first. "What is it, Sentinel?" Mirai asked. Her voice was gentle but confused. Jin kept his head bowed. He knew he was breaking every rule. "Your Radiance," he said again, his voice urgent, "please, do not enter your chamber tonight." The words hung in the air. The soft, glowing light of the hallway seemed to pulse. The Empress stared at him, her luminous eyes wide with disbelief. The helpers gasped. Jin stayed perfectly still, waiting for her reaction, knowing that his future and perhaps her life depended on this single moment. The silence after Jin's words felt heavy and loud, pressing in on him. The gentle pulse of the hallway's light seemed to stutter. Empress Mirai took a small step back, her glowing skin flickering with surprise and confusion. Her two attendants moved closer to her, their faces showing alarm as they stared at the human guard who had dared to speak. "Sentinel," Mirai said, her voice tighter now, losing its gentle tone. "Explain yourself immediately." Jin kept his head bowed, his eyes fixed on the softly glowing floor. He knew he had to choose his words with extreme care. He had no solid proof, only a collection of suspicions. "Your Radiance," he began, his voice low and respectful but firm. "I have observed certain actions. They do not fit together correctly. I believe there is a threat to your safety inside your chamber." Before he could say another word, a smooth, confident voice cut through the tension from behind him. "My light? Is there a problem here?" Jin did not need to turn around to know it was Kale. The Emperor Consort walked past Jin as if he were not even there, going straight to Mirai's side. He placed a protective hand on her arm, his face a perfect picture of concern. "This Sentinel approached me," Mirai said, her gaze shifting from Jin to her husband. "He told me not to enter my chambers." Kale's eyes widened in what looked like honest shock. He turned his head slowly, and for the first time his deep blue eyes focused on Jin. The look was cold, a direct contrast to the warm worry on his face. It was the same cold look Jin had seen earlier. "What is the meaning of this?" Kale's voice was loud and firm, filling the hallway. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed. "Why are you frightening the Empress with your primitive instincts?" Just then, Guard Captain Su arrived with two of his Ixian guards. Su's sharp eyes took in the scene instantly. He saw the distressed Empress, the angry Emperor Consort, and the human Sentinel standing between them. His lip curled in distaste. "He has overstepped his position, Your Radiance," Su said, his hand resting on the hilt of his energy blade. "This is what happens when we rely on creatures who think with fear instead of logic." Jin felt the situation slipping away from him. He was surrounded by the most powerful people in the Empire, and they were all united against him. He had to make them listen. "The order for the dampening field," Jin said, raising his head slightly to look directly at Mirai, ignoring the others. "This morning, in your chamber. The log says it was for sensor calibration, but the authorization code was Lord Kale's. A Royal Guard tech did not do it. He has no reason to give such an order." For a brief second, Mirai's face showed a flicker of doubt. She looked at Kale. Kale's reaction was masterful. He let out a soft, sad laugh and shook his head. He looked at Mirai with a hurt expression. "My dear light, is that what this is about? The dampening field?" He turned a condescending smile toward Jin. "Your vigilance is noted, Sentinel, but you have misunderstood a simple act of love." He turned back to Mirai, his voice dropping to a warm, intimate tone. "I ordered the field to speak with the decorators in private. I did not want you to hear. I have planned a surprise for you in our chambers. A small gift to celebrate the anniversary of our bonding. This human, he said, the word sounding like an insult, has let his imagination turn my love into a threat. Sue stepped forward, his tall frame looming over Jin. You see, your human fears have caused you to embarrass yourself and insult the Emperor consort. You have broken protocol and disturbed the Empress's peace. The explanation was perfect. It was simple, romantic, and made Jin look like a fool. Mirai's face softened. The doubt was replaced by embarrassment and a little anger. She was a modern thinker, but she was also very young, and the pressure of the court was immense. Her husband's story was comfortable and easy to believe. The human story was strange and frightening. A surprise, she murmured, looking at Kale. Yes, my love, Kale said softly, squeezing her arm. And now this guard has ruined it. Jin felt a cold dread wash over him. He was losing. Your radiance, please, he tried one last time. The data crystal. I saw Lord Kale pass a data crystal to Captain Sue in the main hall. Secretly. Why would they need to do that? This time Sue answered. His voice was a low growl. The crystal contained the final security clearance for the artisans bringing your gift into the royal chamber, you fool. It was a routine matter. You have been spying on your superiors and constructing wild stories in your head. The walls were closing in. Every piece of his evidence had been neatly explained away. He was just a human, a primitive creature seeing monsters in the shadows. The trust in history between Mirai, Kale, and Sue was a strong wall, and he was just one man throwing himself against it. Mirai looked at Jin. The initial shock was gone, replaced by a royal displeasure. She felt foolish for having felt a moment of real fear. She felt angry at this guard for making her doubt her husband. Sentinel Jin, she said, her voice cold and formal. You have acted on baseless fear. You have violated the trust of your position. You will surrender your weapon immediately. Jin's heart sank. He had failed. Captain Sue did not wait. He stepped forward and roughly pulled the pulse rifle from Jin's hands. Then he took the small sidearm from Jin's hip. 2 Ixian guards moved to flank him, their hands on their weapons. Take him to a detention cell, Sue commanded. He will be held until a disciplinary hearing can be arranged. As the guards took hold of his arms, Jin did not resist. He looked past Kale's smug face and Sue's triumphant glare. He looked directly at Empress Mirai one last time. Do not go into the chamber, he said, his voice quiet but filled with a final, desperate conviction. Then he was pulled away, down the glowing hallway away from the Empress. He saw her turn back to Kale, who was already speaking to her in a soft, comforting voice, leading her toward the lift. The last thing Jin saw before he was led around a corner was the lift doors beginning to close with Mirai and Kale inside. The journey to the detention level was a blur. The halls here were less beautiful, the light a dull, steady blue. The guards pushed him into a small, plain room. The door, a solid sheet of energy, snapped shut behind him with a definitive hum. He was alone. He had tried to do the right thing, and now he was a prisoner. He had given the warning, and it had not been enough. He sat on the hard bench, listening to the hum of the energy door. He could only hope that the Empress's anger would be the worst thing to happen to her tonight. But the cold, hard knot in his stomach told him otherwise. He had done all he could, and it had failed. Now all he could do was wait and hope he was wrong. The lift ride was silent. Mirai stood beside Kale, her arms crossed. She felt a mix of emotions. She was angry at the human guard for causing a scene. She was embarrassed that she had felt a moment of real fear. And she was a little disappointed that her surprise was ruined. Kale put a comforting arm around her. Do not let it trouble you, my light, he said softly. The human was just doing what his simple nature tells him to do. He sees danger everywhere. It is why they make good guards, but sometimes they forget their place. Mirai nodded, but she did not say anything. A small, quiet part of her mind replayed the scene. The human's eyes. They had not looked crazy or fearful. They had looked certain, and his voice had been so sure. The lift doors opened directly into the antechamber of her private rooms. It was a beautiful, circular room with a high ceiling. The walls glowed with a soft golden light. Everything looked normal, peaceful, see? Kale said, spreading his hands. Everything is as it should be, safe and sound. He walked over to the large, ornate door that led to her main bedchamber. Your surprise is waiting for you in here. I had hoped to lead you in myself, but... He gave a sad smile. Well, the moment is spoiled. But the gift is still for you. Mirai looked at the door. It was just a door. The same door she walked through every night. But now, because of the human's warning, it felt different. It felt like a giant mouth waiting to open. Go on, Kale encouraged her, his voice warm. I will wait here. I know you need a moment to yourself after all that excitement. That was strange, Mirai thought. He did not want to come in with her. He had planned this whole surprise, but now he did not want to see her reaction. Her eyes moved from Kale to Captain Sue, who stood near the entrance of the antechamber. His posture was stiff, his hand resting on his weapon. He was not looking at her. He was staring at the floor, his jaw tight. The small, quiet part of her mind grew louder. Jin's words echoed. The data crystal. The dampening field. She took a slow step toward the bedroom door. Then another. Her heart was starting to beat a little faster. This was silly, she told herself. It was her own room. Kale loved her. He had a perfectly good explanation for everything. She reached for the handle. It was a beautiful, curved piece of glowing crystal. She paused, her hand just inches from it. She looked back at Kale. His smile was still there, but it looked tight around the edges. His eyes were focused on her hand. He was waiting. He was not smiling with joy. He was smiling with anticipation. In that frozen moment, Mirai remembered the look on the human sentinel's face in the detention cell. The last thing he said, it was not a plea. It was a final statement of fact. Do not go into the chamber. Her fingers touched the cold crystal handle. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. She did not step forward. She stood in the doorway looking in. The room was dark. The usual soft glow of the walls was off. In the center of the room she could see a shape, a large object covered by a silken cloth. A gift. Kale had told the truth. A wave of relief washed over her. She felt a sudden shame for doubting her husband. She was about to turn and apologize to him for her hesitation when she saw a tiny, almost invisible shimmer in the air directly in front of her, right at the threshold. It was like heat rising off the desert sand. If she had taken a full step forward, she would have walked right into it. Her blood went cold. She jerked back just as a net of brilliant, crackling energy erupted from the doorway. It was not meant to capture. It was meant to kill. The edge of the net grazed her arm and a searing, painful shock shot through her body. She screamed and fell backward onto the floor of the antechamber. For a second, there was complete silence, broken only by the sizzle of the energy net. Then, everything happened at once. Mirai looked up, her arm burning with pain. Kale's face had transformed. The warm, concerned mask was gone. Now his face was a cold, hard mask of fury. His plan had failed because she had hesitated. Sue, now. Kale shouted, his voice a harsh snarl. Captain Sue drew his energy blade. The blue beam hummed to life, but he did not move toward the bedroom to disable the trap. He turned and advanced toward Mirai where she lay on the floor. You, Sue spat, his eyes full of a hatred she had never seen before, and your foolish new ideas. You are weakening the Empire. It ends tonight. Mirai scrambled backward, her mind reeling. It was all true. Every word the human had said was true. Her husband, the man she loved, had tried to kill her, and her head guard was his partner. Kale took a step toward her, pulling a small, sleek plasma pistol from inside his robe. You should have just walked in, he said, his voice cold and flat. It would have been quick, painless. This way will be messy. We will have to say the human sentinel did it, that he broke out of his cell and attacked you in a mad rage. He raised the pistol, aiming it at her heart. Mirai was trapped on the floor, with Sue and his energy blade on one side and Kale with a plasma pistol on the other. There was nowhere to run. The truth had not saved her. It had only made her final moments more terrible. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. Down in the detention cell, Jin was pacing. The hum of the energy door was a constant reminder of his failure. Suddenly, a different sound cut through the hum. A loud, piercing alarm. It was the security alarm from the upper levels. The royal alarm. He was not wrong. The Empress was in danger right now, and he was locked in a cell. He ran to the energy door and looked out. The hallway was empty. The guard who had been stationed there was gone, probably running toward the alarm. Jin looked at the door's control panel. It was a simple Ixian design. A flat panel with a glowing lock mechanism. It was meant to hold Ixians who relied on technology and were not physically strong. They had not considered a human's raw strength. He stepped back, took a deep breath, and then kicked the door as hard as he could. Right next to the control panel, the door shuddered and the glowing light flickered. He kicked it again, putting all his weight and force behind it. On the third kick, there was a sharp cracking sound. The control panel sparked and the energy field vanished. He was free. He did not hesitate. He ran out into the hallway and started sprinting. He did not know where the guards had taken his weapons, and there was no time to look. He had only his hands, his training, and the desperate need to reach the Empress. He ran up the ramps, taking the steps 3 at a time. The alarm was louder up here. He could hear shouts and the sound of running feet. He followed the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst into the antechamber of the Empress's quarters and froze for a split second, taking in the horrible scene. Empress Mirai was on the floor, clutching her injured arm. Captain Sue was standing over her, his energy blade raised, ready to strike. And Kale was pointing a plasma pistol directly at her. There was no time for a plan. There was only time for action. Jin moved. He did not shout. He did not warn them. He became a weapon himself. He charged across the room and slammed into Captain Sue just as the energy blade began its downward arc. The impact was brutal. Sue was a trained fighter, but he was not expecting an attack from behind. They crashed to the floor together. Jin's hand found Sue's wrist and he smashed it against the hard floor. Once, twice. The energy blade clattered away, deactivating as it left Sue's grip. Kale spun around, his eyes wide with shock and rage. "You!" he screamed. He swung the plasma pistol away from Mirai and toward Jin. Jin was still on the floor with Sue struggling beneath him. He had no cover. He was an easy target. You would die for her? Kale spat, his finger tightening on the trigger. A human for an Empress? Jin looked up from the floor, his body positioned between the pistol and the Empress. He met Kale's furious gaze. His own face was calm. "I swore an oath," Jin stated, his voice steady and clear. "It did not end with my imprisonment." In that moment, the main door to the antechamber burst open. A full squad of royal guards, their weapons drawn, flooded into the room. They had come because of the alarm. They stopped, confused. They saw their captain on the floor, struggling with the human sentinel. They saw their emperor consort aiming a plasma pistol at the human. And they saw their empress, wounded and terrified, on the floor behind the human. The picture told its own story. "Arrest them." Mirai's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, filled with a pain and authority they had never heard before. She pointed a trembling finger at Kale and Sue. "Arrest them both for treason." The loyal guards hesitated for only a second. Then they moved. They surrounded Kale, forcing him to drop his weapon. They pulled a stunned and defeated Sue from the floor. The fight was over. Jin slowly got to his feet. He was breathing heavily. He turned and looked at Empress Mirai. She was still on the floor, but she was looking back at him. The fear in her eyes was being replaced by a dawning, terrible understanding. And gratitude. The human had been right. He had seen the truth when no one else could. And he had come back to save her, even after she had him thrown in a cell. He had kept his oath. The antechamber was suddenly very full and very quiet. The only sounds were the hum of the guards' weapons and Kale's ragged breathing as 2 guards held his arms. The beautiful, glowing room felt tainted now, the scene of a terrible betrayal. Empress Mirai slowly got to her feet. She winced as she put weight on her injured arm. The place where the energy net had grazed her was a nasty, dark burn. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hurt inside. She looked at her husband. The man she had loved and trusted was staring back at her with pure hatred. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kale stopped struggling. He stood up straight, his face proud and cold. "Why?" he repeated, his voice loud and sharp. "Because you are weak. You want to change our traditions.
You want to give more power to the common people.
You want to make friends with races like his." He jerked his head toward Jin. "You are tearing down the empire our families built over 1,000 years." He spoke not like a husband, but like a politician giving a speech. "My family has served the Ixian throne for generations. We understood strength. We understood power. You understand nothing but foolish dreams. I was saving the empire from you." Mirai listened, and her sadness began to harden into something else, something strong. "You were not saving the empire, Kale. You were stealing it for yourself." She turned her gaze to Captain Sue. He would not look at her. "And you, Captain? You swore an oath to protect me." Sue finally lifted his head. His pride was broken. "I swore an oath to protect the empire," he said, his voice hollow. I believed he was the empire's best chance." Mirai shook her head. She felt very tired and very old. Take them to the high-security cells, she commanded the guards. They will face the high court for treason. The guards led Kyle and Sue away. Kyle went silently, his head held high. Sue walked with his head down, a broken man. When they were gone, the room felt empty again. Only Mirai, Jin, and a few guards remained. The silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the quiet after a storm. Mirai looked at Jin. He was still standing in the middle of the room watching her. He had no weapon. His uniform was messy from the fight. He had just risked his life for her, after she had punished him for telling the truth. She walked toward him. Every step felt heavy. When she was close, she stopped. She did not know what to say. Thank you did not seem like enough. Sentinel Jin, she began, her voice soft. I was wrong. I did not listen. I am sorry. Jin gave a small bow of his head. You had no reason to trust a stranger over your husband, Your Radiance. But you were not a stranger to the truth, she said. She looked at the burn on her arm. You tried to warn me, and when I failed to listen, you came back. Why? I had you imprisoned. Jin thought for a moment before he answered. The oath I swore was to protect you. It was not conditional on you always making the right choice. My duty did not end when the cell door closed. His words were simple, but they held a powerful meaning. His loyalty was not something that could be turned on and off. It was a part of who he was. Mirai felt a deep respect for this human. In her world of politics and hidden meanings, his direct honesty was like a clean breath of air. You saw what no one else could see, she said. Not my advisors, not my other guards. How? It is what humans are trained to do, Your Radiance, Jin explained. We look for the small things, the story that is not being told with words. Your husband was very careful, but he could not hide everything. He could not hide the look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. He could not hide the small, secret movements of his hands. To me, these things were like loud shouts. Mirai nodded slowly. She understood now. The Ixians relied on their advanced technology and their beautiful manners. They had forgotten how to see the raw truth in a person's face. Your primitive instincts, as Kyle called them, saved my life, she said. And you saved my empire from a civil war. If Kale had become emperor, many planets would have rebelled. There would have been fighting and death across the stars. She made a decision. It was a sudden decision, but it felt more right than any she had made in a long time. Captain Sue is a traitor, she stated. The position of head of the Royal Guard is now empty. She looked directly at Jin. I cannot think of anyone more loyal or more capable to protect me. The court will not like it. They will say a human should not have such a high position. But I do not care. Sentinel Jin, will you serve as my new head of guard? It was an incredible offer. It was a position of great power and trust, usually held by a high-born Ixian. For a human, it was unheard of. Jin looked surprised for a moment. Then his face became calm and serious again. He bowed deeply, lower this time. The honor is mine, Your Radiance, he said. I accept. A small, genuine smile touched Mirai's lips for the first time that night. Good. She turned to one of the remaining guards. Find the Sentinel's weapons and return them to him. Then send for the royal medic. I need my arm treated, and have someone deactivate that thing in my bedroom. The guard bowed and hurried away. Mirai turned back to Jin. The man who was once just a guard was now her most trusted protector. The night had been terrible, but it had also cleared away the lies. She knew who her enemies were, and she knew, without a doubt, who her friends were. The court will be in an uproar tomorrow, she said almost to herself. That does not matter, Jin replied, his voice steady. My duty is to your safety, not to their opinions. Mirai looked at this human standing so solid and true in her broken world. For the first time since the door had opened, she felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain and would be difficult. But she was no longer alone in the dark. She had a sentinel who could see the truth. And that was a greater weapon than any plasma pistol or energy blade. The days that followed were a storm of activity and quiet anger. The news of Kale and Sue's treason spread through the Grand Spire like a shockwave. At first, there was disbelief. Then, as the evidence was laid out, the trap in the bedroom, the secret orders, their own confessions, disbelief turned to a grim acceptance. The High Court moved quickly. Kyle, from his cell, showed no regret. He spoke of his actions as a necessary sacrifice for a stronger empire. The judges listened with stone faces. He was found guilty of treason and sentenced to permanent exile on a remote, barren moon. He would live out his days alone, surrounded by silence. His name erased from all imperial records. Captain Sue, broken and ashamed, confessed to everything. His sentence was life in a maximum security prison, stripped of his rank and honors. With the traitors gone, the real work began for Empress Mirai. Her arm healed, but the memory of that night did not fade. She sat in her throne room, which now felt both larger and emptier. The courtiers who came to see her were nervous. They bowed and said the right words, but their eyes were full of doubt and fear. The human Jin was now the head of the royal guard. It was a scandal. It was a revolution. Jin stood beside her throne during these meetings. He was not like the Ixian guards who had come before. He did not wear elaborate armor. He wore his simple dark Sentinel uniform, now with a single new insignia on the shoulder. He did not speak unless spoken to, but his presence changed the room. He was a constant silent reminder of the night the old order had shattered. Many of the high-born lords and ladies did not like it. Lord Day, a tall Ixian with a silver glow, was the first to voice his complaint. "Your Radiance," he said, bowing low. "The appointment of a human to lead your guard. It is without precedent. The people are uneasy. They worry that our traditions are being cast aside." Mirai looked at Lord Day. She knew he had been a friend of Kale's family. She kept her voice calm but firm. "The previous head of guard, who was Ixian, tried to kill me, Lord Day. Sentinel Jin, who is human, saved my life. I trust the one who saved my life more than I trust a precedent that failed." Lord Day opened his mouth to argue, but then his eyes flickered to Jin. Jin was looking straight ahead, his expression neutral, but there was a stillness about him, a sense of readiness that made Lord Day close his mouth again. He bowed and stepped back. This happened again and again. A noble would question her. They would question Jin's appointment. But when they looked at Jin, their arguments seemed to die in their throats. He was not a politician to debate with. He was a fact. He was the wall that now stood between the Empress and any danger. His quiet strength was more powerful than any loud protest. Slowly, the court began to change. The whispers did not stop, but they grew quieter. The nobles who had supported Kale's traditionalist views kept their heads down. The nobles who believed in Mirai's vision for a more open empire felt a new sense of hope. The balance of power had shifted. One evening, a week after the treason, Mirai walked in her private garden. The garden was under a dome that showed the stars above. Jin walked a few steps behind her, giving her space but remaining close. "They are afraid of you," Mirai said, not turning around. Jin was silent for a moment. "They are not afraid of me, Your Radiance. They are afraid of what I represent. Change, and does it bother you?" she asked. "The things they say?" "No," Jin answered simply. "My duty is your safety. Their opinions do not make my job harder or easier." Mirai stopped and looked up at the stars. Kale was wrong, you know. He thought strength was about holding on to the past. But real strength is about knowing what is truly valuable. It is about loyalty. It is about seeing the truth. She turned to face him. "You have that strength." She gestured to the palace around them. "You have given me a chance to build the empire I always wanted to build. An empire that is strong because it is fair, not because it is cruel. An empire where different species like humans and Ixians can work together." Jin nodded. "It is a good goal, Your Radiance." "It will not be easy," she said. "There will be more Lord Dais, more people who resist." "I know," Jin said. "But now you will see them coming." He was right. The attempt on her life had opened her eyes. She saw the court now not as a family, but as a collection of individuals with their own plans. And she had learned to look past their glowing skin and polite words, to see the truth in their eyes just as her human guard did. A new era was beginning for the Ixian Star Empire. It was an era that had started with a warning from a most unlikely person. It had been forged in betrayal and saved by an oath of honor. Empress Mirai stood a little taller. The pain was still there, but it was overshadowed by a new determination. She was no longer the young, uncertain Empress. She was a ruler who had stared into the darkness and survived. And by her side, silent and watchful, was her Sentinel. He was the proof that in a universe of advanced technology and ancient traditions, the most powerful tool was still a loyal heart and a pair of eyes that could see what others missed. The human who had seen the crack in the perfect world had not let it collapse. He had helped her build a new one, stronger and more honest than before.